So that's great. We're just waiting for him to come. Let's just quick talk about before he gets on the Crystal the Scotchy Bourbon Boys Crystal GC Club is getting close to sold out. I've got one $500 slot left, and that you get this awesome Scotchy Bourbon Boys Crystal Glencairn, and you get also in that $500 spot, you get the Spirit of French Lick William Dalton pick that I've got right here. You get that right away. That comes with the $500 level. And then you get also, we are going to be doing a pick at Elijah Craig on Monday, September 11th at 10 a.m. And you are going to get that bottle once it's bottled. We're going to make that pick. It's bottled, and I will ship it out to you or make arrangements to get it to you. So that's what's in the Crystal GC Club. Then we've got one of those tickets, but then we have one more of the Kings Club. The 500 GC was the presidential, but one more in the Kings Club, and that one is okay. We got Aaron coming on, so I can go. That one is basically $1,000, but it gets you on a bus tour with us, and it gets you on a barrel pick plus everything else that comes along. So we're getting Aaron in here right now. There he is. Woo!
Hey, right. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties.
It's all right. Technically our podcast, it's nice to meet you. I'm Tiny, and we are technical difficulties. I mean, you could actually put TD right in there in the name, because that's it's a rare podcast that something doesn't go wrong. I mean, I'm just waiting for we've done this, I believe, is close to our 300th podcast, and there's not been one without a technical difficulty.
Yeah, my headphones would not connect, and they have the noise canceling microphone built in. So I'm sorry if you can hear the AC or if it's echoey. I don't know how I sound.
You sound good.
Yeah, it's not bad. And what I run it through 2 software programs to correct the sound, so you should be good. Unless it's absolutely horrible, and it's not, it works out. So nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for being on there. What so things in Smoke Wagon happening today? What are you working on today?
Today we started bottling the private barrels that are going online. Those are the 49% malted barley, 51% rye barrels. And I wrote in the caption, I do not know when this is going to be online. We're just bottling them today. I do not know when they're going to ship. This is a totally different mash bill than what the stores have been getting. They got this mash bill. This is this mash bill. And then all the comments like, when's it going to be online? I can't find it online. Why isn't it online? Or I saw this in a store and you say nobody else has this. I'm like, oh my God, please just read the caption.
So you have a problem with people being able to read too.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the purple and white bottle?
Yes.
That's really cool looking. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean the thing is, it's all like, the vodka, we have to change the name to Smoke Wagon Silver Dollar Vodka because nobody knows it's our vodka. And I'm just like, what? It's how do you not know? It's the same bottle. And then even Uncut the Younger, I'm probably gonna have to change the name for that. And I thought Younger would be the sticking point, but it's Uncut because of the price point. It's crossed over into the general consumer market, and everything has to be super obvious. Like they don't know what Uncut means. They don't, it's got to be, barrel strength. It can't be cask strength. It can't be barrel proof. It has to be barrel strength. And like Uncut, they're like, what's Uncut? Like they think it's like they associate with circumcision, and I'm like, it means no water added. So it's like, these are the things you have to deal with.
Scotchy Bourbon Boys, raisins in hell and making some noise. Yeah, we're the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. We're here to have fun and we hope you enjoy. We're here to have fun, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, it's I don't care what post or whatever that you do. If it gets a little bit complicated, there are so many people that will make comments that just quite don't get what's going on. But you know what's great about what you're talking about? If your brand was very specific to just like a lot of brands, it's just the whiskey aficionados, but you've
Right.
actually branched out to the people who don't know. So I guess that with them not knowing and the fact that they're asking, it means your popularity of your brand is, has just taken off.
Oh yeah, for that stuff, absolutely. And that's kind of, it's what you have to do. I mean, if you want to like be real, you have to cross over to the general consumer because the ebb and flow of what Bourbon Collectors is doing, it can't be your business model. And that was like one of the reasons I tried to get away from, this is the first time we're doing barrel picks again in since 2020. And I mean, one of the reasons I stopped doing barrel picks was inventory problems. I did not want to burn through all my old barrels and not be able to do uncut unfiltered the way I wanted, because it's very easy to predict, okay, how long do I have to make this old stuff last until new stuff comes of age? But but that was also, I wanted to focus on the core expressions because I really wanted to get away from uh, the hype and just be even bourbon drinkers, bourbon guys, but as well as like the general consumer, but have everybody drinking it. I wanted people to actually be depleting bottles, and I know it sounds crazy, right? But you got to remember, everybody was like just collecting stuff. So that was the goal was always to get away from the hype and become real and actually be something that people were drinking.
That's excellent. You can't go away from that. Plus, like you said, you got to do the other spirits because that's if you don't do the other spirits, you're just leaving money on the table because that stuff is straight distill bottle and then on the shelf where
Oh, you mean like the vodka?
yeah.
Well, the vodka's, I did it because it was first.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's like when I was drinking vodka, I wish there was a vodka that was that clean and that good. And there wasn't. And so it's just kind of like whatever. But now the straight bourbon, the entry level and uncut the younger, the straight bourbon now outsells uncut unfiltered 2 to 1 because of the price point. And when I did that 4 years ago, I shouldn't say everybody, there was a lot of critics who were like, why are you doing this? And blah, 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 you should be doing that. I'm like, I think everything's getting too weird and too expensive, and I want to have an affordable daily sipper. And B, as a brand, I think we should be well-rounded. Nobody's doing this. Nobody is like trying to do a good unchill filtered bourbon in this price point, and this all might not last. And so I want to be in a good position where I can, where we can survive any downturns. And then that's sort of like why I did uncut the younger, so like kind of talking about these other spirits. Yeah, it'd be nice to do all these like super amazing, incredible limited releases all the time. but you need those workhorses that people can find every day.
Sure.
At least that's how I feel.
Well, you're right. I mean, you know, I'll be waiting in a line for a release of a bourbon, and everybody's in line, and they just, when you explain to them, Jack Daniels outsells pretty much every small batch put together. It's
Oh,
like you
well,
take them
yeah.
all in the country, put them all together, and it still outsells it. And that's exactly what you're talking about. That's going to the general consumer whiskey drinker. And you know, and you're presenting something a little bit different when it comes to that because of the difference of your bottles. You know, you have those different labels for different times, you know, the 4th of July, the Christmas, even though they're not actual Christmas expressions, you know, it's
Right.
that batch that comes out then that you're making, that you're selling at that reasonable price. You know, what people are like,
Well, that's the thing too, because all the creativity for those is me designing the label. So if people don't drink it, I'm like, that's cool, whatever. You know, it's just straight bourbon. If you want to collect that, you can collect it. But that's a reward because you enjoy the design. When I do something like a rare and limited or something like that, and people collect them, I'm just like, I kind of would like you to taste what's inside there, because that's where all the work went, you know?
Right. Well,
Yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
collect a whole lot more of the $30 bottles and not open them than the rare ones. So
Yeah.
All right, so that was like a pre-podcast. We're live on Facebook, by the way. So we've
Okay.
got a bunch of people watching. We got it all shared to all of the whiskey groups, so we should get a
Is
decent
there a chat
audience tonight.
window I should have open? Oh, there it is. Let's see if we got any chats coming through.
This is Alan Bishop, head alchemist at Spirits of French Lick. Be on the lookout for a brand new bottled and bond Solomon Scott rye whiskey. Made from a mash composed of 65% rye, 35% corn, and 5% victory malt. This 5-year-old 100 proof rye whiskey is a throwback to early 1800s style rye whiskeys of the Ohio Valley. Named after the legendary Daisy Spring Mill distillery owner turned moonshiner Solomon Scott of Paoli, Indiana. Remember, drink responsibly and never drink and drive. Hey, Scotchy Bourbon Boys fans, this is Alan Bishop, Indiana's alchemist of the Black Forest. So I'm tuning in here today to tell you all about the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute channel on YouTube. If you're at all interested in the art of distilling, whether it be home distilling or professional distilling, and the intense geekery that goes into that process, then check out the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute on YouTube. I promise you're going to learn something you didn't know before about the arts.
All right, welcome to another podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. That there was Kenny Fuller of the Luca Mariano Old Americana Band, and we are back for another exciting podcast. Tonight, we have a very special guest, and I'm going to let Aaron, you introduce yourself, because I just want to make sure everything gets the, you know, your title and who you are, you know, this way. So, because I don't want a technical difficulty and fuck it up. There you go.
Hello, my name is Aaron.
Perfect.
I you know, title, who knows? I don't really have a title. I mean, I'm one of the two owners of Nevada Agency Distilling. We do Smoke Wagon bourbon, and that's what we're mainly known for. You know, I mean, when we started, we had the bourbon and the vodka, but it's pretty much all about the bourbon now. And I do all the blending and everything, and design everything, and just kind of figure it all out. And I don't really have a title, I guess.
you're the Instagram guy, though.
I am the Instagram guy. That was not planned at all. Not even remotely.
But that's how the internet works. It's like you find, when you're like trying to promote yourself on social media, I do it a lot. It's kind of like you find your niche. You know, it could have been some other media, but that's the one that takes off. And then once it takes off, it's almost like an addiction, right?
Yeah, well, it was free, first of all, free marketing. And because of the analytics, it was like very easy to sort of figure out what worked and what didn't work. Like I still like we have a YouTube channel, and what works on Instagram does not work on YouTube. Like everybody loves the out of the bottle tasting stuff and the short reels and all the like skits I do on Instagram, but they don't care about that on YouTube. Um, when I was doing longer videos, I really like that on YouTube, but it's so hard to do in the space now because it's so busy. I can't like stand there and do a long video the way I used to. But when I started, like my success in the bar business all stemmed from I was always in the shadows. It was like never about me. It was never like, here's my bar, check me out. It was always like about the customer's experience and the staff and everything. And so when it came time to bourbon, this was like 2016, and everybody had a bullshit story. Like, oh, my great grandpappy died, and we found his recipe in his shoe, or his last dying words were like, make the bourbon the way I did during Prohibition. I was like, I'm not doing any of that shit. It's just about the bourbon, the way the bars were about the bars. And so everything was just like bottle pictures. And I remember it was actually the beverage director for the Win. I did a presentation for her and she was like, you're the story. Like nobody's talking the way you're talking. You need to get in front of the staff. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I should talk about this stuff on Instagram, and it resonated, fortunately. And it was like, I was very, it took me a while to get into it and figure it out. And, it wasn't like, oh, I want to be a big Instagram star or I want to be the bourbon guy. It was always just supposed to be about the bourbon. But, we had no money. All our money went into making sure we laid down new fills. So I was just trying to figure it out. And I'd see, okay, when I do these dumb videos, like joking around, people like them. When I do informative videos about the industry or what I'm doing, they don't get as much likes, but the engagement's huge and it gets exposed to a lot of accounts that aren't following us. And bottle pictures get all the likes, but it's only people that are following us and nobody comments and nobody's like really being exposed to the brand. So I just would try to, kind of figure it out between all those things. And the crazy thing is, before COVID, I was out all the time trying to sell a brand or doing events. And you cannot advertise retailers on Instagram. The TTB sees it as unfair. Like you're giving one retailer an unfair advantage over another. So the Instagram was really lame for the most part. And then there was COVID. And I was like, well, shit, I'm just sitting around smoking cigars, drinking bourbon by my pool. I mean, not everybody has a pool, but I'm sure that's what everybody else was doing. So, and then I was spending a lot more time at home. And so I could start posting more. And that's when I started doing the uncut, unfiltered posts about what I was drinking. And then we kind of blew up. So I was spending more time in the distillery and no time out in market. So I could really, there was a lot more content because I was doing a lot more that, it just the way things worked out, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so it kind of, I'd like to also let everybody know that CT is joining us here tonight. Hey, CT.
If they haven't figured that out yet, then I can probably
but you got to remember that audio. You were on there, but nobody could see you on when the audio. So I have to like make a point to let everybody know
I'm here.
You're here, yeah. And I myself, Tiny. It's great to have you here, Aaron. But when you were talking, exactly the time period when you were doing that is right when I was getting into bourbon and then deciding to do the podcast. We started the podcast in November of 2019, and COVID was hitting in March of 2020. So at that point, that March, I was like, we were stunned, because you didn't know what to do. I mean, all of a sudden you're home. and it's like, everybody was, people weren't working. I was working because of essential services. And, it was just, you kind of got into this tumble, but as you were tumbling, you kind of rolled out of it right into like starting to push a little bit harder because everybody was home. And so
Right.
when you did the videos, all of a sudden 5,000 people were watching, and you're just like, what is going on here? And
Yeah.
you're getting all this exposure. So that was great. But also, you also talked about how when you first started out and you were going out and you were selling a certain way, right?
Yes.
And the people were very, in my opinion, when I first got into this in that time period, everybody was so critical about what bourbon was. It's like, I
Mhm.
just remember I'd be on the groups and that people would be like, that's a finished bourbon, that's not real bourbon, and they just like, they would hand it out. If you were wrong about something, those would be our biggest podcasts. If you said the wrong mash bill you would just have hundreds of people just bashing the living hell out of you. And then COVID hit, and it was going, and it started like, and everybody started trying different things, right? I mean, all of a sudden the market, like all these the bourbon snobs, what you like to call, they kind of got pushed back out of the way because there was all these new people drinking whiskey and bourbon at home, having them shipped to their house and everything, that they started exactly what and they started paying attention to what was unique and what you were doing on your Instagram. It was unique, right? Nobody
Yeah.
talked the way you talked.
Well, yeah, because we're very even now, I still get messages about people saying you are the most transparent brand I've ever seen. Because I talk about everything that goes into what every blend and what I'm doing and all that. And it is funny. So in 2016, when I was doing tastings and stuff, I'd say I got, oh, you're just source bourbon, blah, blah, blah. And that was, we had already started putting distilled in Indiana from the beginning before the TTB was enforcing it. And then when TTB started enforcing it, everybody started doing multi-state blends so they could be a blend of straight bourbons and take the state of distillation off the back. And then they'd be like, oh yeah, we distill our own. And I just had the attitude, I was like, look, if you don't like it, then don't buy it. And if you do like it and you're not going to buy it, because if you like it and you think it's unique and you're not going to buy it just because I'm not the distiller, I don't want you drinking it because I don't want you associated with the brand, because you're probably a fucking insufferable cunt. And you probably walk into the room, Mr. Like, I'm going to annoy the shit out of everybody with my bourbon ideas and things. And I don't want to be a brand associated with people like you. And that was, that was like literally, I was like, if you like it, look, all I can do is do what I can, and you either like it or you don't. And if you do like it, cool, thank you. And if you don't, then hey, I like it.
Go on to the next one. I mean, there's not a bourbon on the planet that every single person loves. I mean, there's styles of whiskey, and I always find where it's aged, and different regions, especially with bourbons, and they all kind of have their own, terroir or whatever. And
everything's different. Like, because nobody has an oak farm, so all your barrels are all the wood's going to be different. I see people get obsessed with age. I'm like, well, I can give you a 4-year bourbon off the 6th floor on a south-facing wall that is almost over oaked, or I can give you a 12-year on the 1st floor that's perfect. It's like age is relative to warehouse position and temperature swings and aging conditions and everything. And it's just but to sort of what you were saying, a lot changed during COVID because, well, first of all, alcohol was not sensitive content on Instagram yet. So you got a lot more exposure. And then people were buying stuff to put on their shelf and take shelfies and show off their collection. And all of a sudden, it didn't matter if it was sourced or not sourced, or even if it was good or bad. It was just, is it rare? And if it was rare, people were buying it and not even drinking it and taking pictures of it. And everybody's liking their pictures and the serotonin's flowing and they're feeling good. And then all of a sudden, Instagram took all that away by making alcohol sensitive content. COVID was over and everybody's going back to work. So they're not on their phone all day looking at people's stuff. And then, you know, gas is expensive. People are driving. If they don't have as much expendable income as they used to, they're like, well, shit, I should start drinking some of this stuff. And they realize that some of those $100 4-year bourbons that they bought that were rare taste like dog shit. And, you know.
CT, do you got anything for Aaron?
No, but I think he's right. It started a movement of collectors for sure, because they're still doing it today. And even though they may not be posting on Instagram and telling people about their rareness or whatever, there are definitely a lot of people that just go out and look for certain bottles just to have it. They're not planning on opening them and drinking them, and that's, I guess, to each their own. I mean, I think we're all in this the thing that we like to open. We want to open it, try it. I have no idea how many open bottles I have in this room, but it's a lot, and I want to enjoy them with people. And like you said, you're gonna have a bottle of $200-300 bottle of Elmer T. Lee. You're gonna open it and be like, this tastes pretty much like the other stuff I've had.
Well, and the thing is, it's like opening a bottle doesn't preserve it. There's nothing going on. None of these seals are airtight. Like everything is just for security purposes. And so you can drink it and still keep it forever, as long as, you know, every once a year, or depending where you live, you tilt the bottle, for a second, let that cork get wet, or if it's a screw top, it doesn't matter. And it's not going to go bad. And so the only reason you wouldn't open it is like if you never wanted to drink it and only had it to sell it, which I don't know. I mean, people have made
Or
money
you're
on
waiting
stuff.
for a really special occasion.
Yeah.
That's
Well, yeah. Like if it's got a date on, like a bottling date or a barrel dump date, and it's like your kid's birthday or your anniversary or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I have stuff that I haven't opened yet, but most of the stuff is
So
open.
how did you guys are in Nevada, right?
Yes.
Las Vegas?
Yep.
Yep. So how did you end up there and then decide to, you know, make a whiskey brand out of Las Vegas, Nevada? I mean, when it really comes down to it, there's not a lot of brands that are hitting the shelf that are right in that area.
Oh yeah, there's a reason for that. You can't age it either. It just all evaporates and turns into nothing. So, you know, like I said, it started off with the vodka. And so at the time, I was still splitting my time between California and LA. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And even at one point, we're like, oh, we should go to like Central Coast, California, like a Atascadero around there, and buy a big ranch or something and just have a big spread. And we're like, no, we got to get out of California. It's too expensive. Nevada is great for business. We have a great relationship with the city. I like, you know, I wasn't really spending any time in California anymore. I was spending all my time in Nevada so we're like, okay. And then with the vodka, we're like, yeah, and then we could get in the casinos, you know, which the irony of that is, no, you will never get in the casinos. It's all money. You want to get in there. Like nobody cares about the local brand. It's you gotta spend big to get in there. That has changed with independent operations like Cosmopolitan, you know, Palazzo Venetian, you know, we're in all those places, but like the corporate compliant places, no. And then it was, I had stopped drinking vodka and started drinking bourbon, and people were like, oh, you should do bourbon. And, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be so interesting to see how it ages there. Cause we actually have cold winters, especially at night, it gets below freezing, and hot summers, you know, it's like, oh, what's going to happen? And what happens is everything evaporates. And so when we started the process, we had 5 fermenters and a Vendome 250-gallon still, which we still have. The state allows me to use that for vodka. Because there is no license for us to distill bourbon on the scale we're doing it. You can be a craft distiller, or if you own a farm like Frey Ranch, you can be an estate distiller, which I believe allows you to do 100,000 cases a year. I think it's 100,000. I don't know if they measure in proof gallons or if it's volume. Like the federal government measures in proof gallons. Like we can't really be considered a craft brand anymore because the Craft Distillers Act covers you up to 100,000 proof gallons, and we sell more than 100,000 proof gallons within 6 months of the year. So, it was just like, hey, let's do this. And you hire a consultant and they're like, okay, well, here's your setup. And we're like, okay, I guess we'll just sell the vodka until the bourbon comes of age. This was 2012, right? Like, started in 2010, 2012. We're like, well, you can just go buy barrels. It's like, no, I don't know shit. I don't know anything. I didn't know you could go buy barrels. They're like, oh yeah, you can go buy barrels. And so, so there was no real strategy. We just kept trying to work with the hand we were dealt. And so it was like, okay, we're going to go to Nevada. We love Las Vegas. We want to kind of get out of California, really do it here. And then when we started designing the brand and everything, my love, coming from the East Coast, I love the West. I love the desert. It's why I love it here. I love it. And so everything was like, it's not going to be like, Las Vegas. It's going to be more Nevada and more Old West, because that's what I love here. I love the history of the old Spanish American Trail, the fact that Nevada has the highest population of wild horses in the country, and burros, all dating back to the 1500s from the Spanish. And so that's what we tried to sort of tie into with the brand. And then also coming from the bar business, I always designed my bars to look like they'd been around for 100 years. That way, when people would walk in, they're like, how did I miss this place? Like, and they just feel like there's someplace like, it doesn't feel like it never gets dated, because it already is dated. And it just feels like a place that they should be familiar with, and so I adapted that with designing all the packaging and everything. And I tried to make it look like the bottles were 100 years old. And
Yeah,
then,
that coin in the middle is pretty cool.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's a neat. That reminds me of that Old West kind of feel. Definitely.
So the idea, it originated with bottles from the 1700s. They would be, rye bottles would be blue with like blue glass, like kind of stuck on the front, and because nobody could read, and corn whiskey would be clear. And then, but all the bourbon bottles I could find from the late 1800s were amber. And then, but the Silver Dollar vodka, which I don't have here, that has a replica of the Morgan Silver Dollar where the wax is. And that's what I designed it all for. And, it's just like, it was just like this process. So we buy these barrels, we get these big giant tanks to put all the barrels in, because we're going to dump them. We're going to dump these 5-year Seagram barrels and pull off those till our stuff comes of age. City never approves the tanks. And then 3.5 years goes by. And all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, we contract distilled with MGP, but we also bought a bunch of new distillate when we bought those Seagram's barrels. And I was looking at our inventory, I was like, oh shit, those are gonna be 4 years old. And the whole plan was to take the 8-year barrel, some 8-year barrels, and use the 4-year barrels to make it taste like the 5-year we liked. And I tried that and it tasted like shit. I was like, this is not gonna work. So I just spent 3 days back then. All I had was one location of 8-year and one location of 4-year. And I spent 3 days blending until I got something I really liked. And my business partner, I was like, hey man, when you be back in Las Vegas, you really got to try this. And he was like, I really like this too. And I was like, I like this better than anything else. I think this is like really something special here. And so now that we weren't using those tanks, we got all our permits approved to open. And so we go to the state, and when we started, there was no distiller's license. You would get a rectifier's license and a letter from the governor giving you permission to distill. And by the time we opened, that was gone because it was a craft distiller's license. So you had to be a craft distiller if you wanted to distill, or a rectifier if you wanted to import barrels. And at this point, we had 2,200 barrels in Indiana from what we bought originally and what we had started contract distilling. And so also a guy opened up locally, and he was a craft distiller, and he answered the question, what will happen to barrels in Las Vegas if you age from day one? Because he lost 50% his first year. Yeah.
Wow. The angel share is pretty deep out there. Must be the road runner.
Not only is it hot, but it's dry. So
It's dry.
that desert just sucks the moisture from the wood, and then it starts sucking the moisture right out of the. So there's no doubt that's what it is, and what you have to do to keep it in a cooler place, it's almost impossible.
Well, the temperature doesn't matter. You would have to humidify it, and there's like no water, and so it was like the writing was on the wall. We had this binary decision. You want to be a rectifier or a craft distiller? And I was like, well, can we distill the vodka if we're a rectifier? And the state said yes, because you distill vodka, you start with neutral grain spirit. You're not distilling from scratch. It said, yes, you can do that. And I said, well, this is what we're gonna fucking do, and like everyone's like, oh, don't release small batch the way you blended it. Make small batch 4 years in a day, and then put your 8-year stuff in an age statement bottle. I was like, this is what we're doing. We're sourcing, and contract distilling. There's no way around it. If I'm not blending, I'm not creating anything unique. I'm just doing what everybody that hates on sourced bourbon does. And so this is it. This is what we're doing. And
but like you said, you're a blender. Okay. So we've had experiences with certain distilleries where their bourbon isn't the greatest to start off, but then they bring somebody in who's got a really nice palate, understands the market, and all of a sudden the quality from the same distillate that they've been making for 6, 7, 8 years, and they start putting stuff in, all of a sudden the quality goes up and it tastes good. And then in one case, the owner let them all go, and now it's back to hit or miss. It's like sometimes it tastes like shit, and other times it's okay. But because that distillate, it wasn't the problem with the distillate. It was a problem with who's blending. Like you said, that first blend, it tasted like shit, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God. And I've always found, and I've asked a lot of distillers and blenders this, it's like, I was tasting something and they were having us blend it. And on one hand, there was one that had like a chocolate mint, and the other one was like a caramel, right? But when you mix the two together, there was pineapple, and there was no pineapple on either one. Yes. And all of a sudden it's like strong pine. And that's one of the cool things about when you do the blending, right?
That's what I tell everybody, because I see these people that talk about blending and they're not blending because they're treating it like they're baking a cake or mixology. And you're not taking these flavors and combining them. And 90% of the time, nothing tastes good on its own. And when you take everything, they're all different proofs. And when you blend them together, that's going to create a chemical reaction. Because even though you're not adding water, like one thing might be 118 proof, another one's 116, and another one's this. And that chemical reaction produces heat. And it changes everything. And you have to try to figure out how to get each one to interact with the other to cause all the bad flavors to go away. You can't like bury a bad, and sometimes everything tastes bad. Everything's like bad on the finish. And so you just have to figure out how to get it to all interact with each other. And I love it. I mean, it's way harder in the wintertime because especially this past winter, it was cold and humid in Las Vegas. So stuff didn't change when I brought it out here. It was extremely cold in Indiana. So everything contracted, it sucked all the tannins and all the impurities out of the wood. And I was like, man, this is fucking hard. But now it's summer again, it's like it's super easy. And but yeah, people are like, oh, you've got the good barrels. I'm like, you come and try these samples, tell me how good they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, there's a lot of people that are picking up now. Like also, what's nice now, how are you dealing with when you started? You started buying MGP barrels, like, and you're very transparent.
Right.
And now though, you were there from the. Do they cut you in where you can keep going? Because I know that kind of that amount of whiskey that was available to you back then has kind of dried up.
Oh, I mean, there is no inventory really. It's all contract. It's all stuff we've
So
been.
then you started going there, having them make what you want. So
Yes.
those are your barrels and they're all aging and you've caught up and now it's basically, yeah, okay.
Especially next year. This year we have some stuff. I bought a bunch of stuff that was like 12 months old that no one was buying because everybody was doing was buying stuff they could sell because nobody cared about the future. They all thought they were going to get bought out. We never want to get bought out. And so when I was buying all these barrels, my sales rep MGP was like, what are you gonna do with these? I'm like, I don't know, dude, the future, like we're gonna need them one day, like we have holes in inventory. And then we just started, so I bought all that, we just started contract distilling as much as we could, which really hurts, because you can't sell it and you don't write it off till you put it in the bottle. It's a very hard thing to do, especially because it should be like maybe 15 or 20% of your, if that, of your income. But if you're planning for the future, it's like 50-60%. And so you have all these huge sales and you're not making any money. And but now, man, everybody's fucked. And that's why I can have straight at low 30s, under 30 with programming, and uncut the younger low 40s, under 40 with programming, because I paid day one prices for the distillate. And I mean, eventually everybody could get there, but I don't think they're going to last long enough. 150 brands went out of business in the past 6 months. And when we're talking about collecting and all that stuff, that price point of over $60, that market has fallen off a cliff.
Well, we just had a brand that last year we were able to pick up for a single barrel for $129 at Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and that was a stretch on my pocket. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially as us as podcasters, I get a crap ton of whiskey sent to me, just to taste and have on, samples. Most of the time when people want to, I'm all for samples, and I like the 375 milliliter bottles because even overall, because I just keep getting more and more whiskey. Plus I like to go out and get the name brand and keep up on it, because with the podcast, as the batches come out and what people per se, generally in the groups want and are looking for, if you do the tastings of it, you got to kind of keep buying it. Keep up current. They're not interested in what was the 2020. They want to know what 2023 tastes like, and so I'm out there always looking. But I mean, now I had gotten to the point where I was buying some of these collector bottles, like 300. I think the most I've spent retail for a bottle was $330 right out of the gift shop. It was signed and everything. Really nice bottle, delicious, but is a you know, a $20 bottle of Jack Daniels compared to a $330 bottle, is that bottle $310 better? Absolutely. I think I love bourbon, and I do not think that gap is ever there, you know, but you're paying for the beautiful packaging, the marketing, and the special
Yeah,
limited.
there's a lot of stuff where I look at the packaging, I'm like, oh my God, that packaging is like, I don't even know what it translates to retail. I've only had one expression that was close to that price, and that was the experimental series for the rye. And that's just because I bought it at 8 years old, and it was super. I mean, it's a very expensive mash bill on day one. You know, day one price, I think we pay $1,100 a barrel for that, and bourbon's like $700 a barrel. And so it hurt to buy it, but there's only 22 of those in the world. So it's like, okay, we got to do it, you know. But like a lot of my stuff, the limited stuff, the way I price it is not necessarily what you see it go for. Because I agree with you. I mean, like a $300 bottle, it's not Scotch.
Well, and
Scotch has
then
got to age for like 20 years, you know. It's like it's bourbon. It's aged in new oak. It's got hot summers, cold winters. There's a lot of movement. It's, you know.
and there's so many different places it's being done. Yeah, I mean, and you know, initially when you started the podcast, we had some Scotch, some Irish, and bourbon, and then a few ryes, and then we got really bourbon centered. You know, we were doing the bourbon centered type stuff, and then I started reaching out to regions. But you know, uh, if you know, some of the regions I like the stuff coming out of there, and I like pot stilled, really good pot stilled whiskey. There's no doubt about it. But then, you know, you've got that you're talking about that. I always call it the Kentucky brand, where you got the big, bold wood, you got the, you know, the flavor of the char and the wood and the caramels and the, you know, the dessert kind of bourbons. But then, you know, it's funny, like you said, with Scotch, used bourbon barrels, and then it's in there and it's in a cooler climate and they can sit there for 20 years. And, you know, it's the fine aspects, but like you said, aging, if you started aging bourbon in, you know, right in the middle of the desert there, by the time it's 3 years old, there'd be almost nothing left.
Yeah.
And it would be like an oak bomb, right? All
Yeah.
it would, and at like 160
Well, so I've had stuff that I brought in at 8 years old and I let it age for, oh no, it's 10 years old. I let it age for 5 years and it came out 160 proof. But man, it is, I mean, we got like 5 cases out of the barrel and it's so thick. It's like maple syrup. And it's 160 proof and it drinks like it's 90 proof, because like you feel it, like you have some and you're like, oh, hey, but drinking it, because it is all the water's evaporated and all that's left is sugar, fat, and alcohol. And it's so good. But if you but that's starting with something that was 10 years old. If I had a day one barrel and it all evaporated in 3 years, it would be like over oaked and not aged all, you know, because you'd lose so much so fast that there's not enough contact with the wood to actually to do anything. You know what I mean? But
so what you're distilling, contract distilling right now, are you aging it in Indiana too?
oh yeah, for most of the time. I mean, now I have 8 year, 7 year, and 6 year that's been in Las Vegas for a long time that I only use an uncut, unfiltered, because the evaporation is so great. The price point's too high for small batch or anything else. But even like I'll pull 4 year barrels, and if they're not ready, we'll let them sit. And then usually we forget about them, and all of a sudden they're 5 or 6 years old. We're like, oh hey, let's use these 24 barrels for uncut, unfiltered.
So do you go there, pick the barrels that are ready, and then have them shipped to you there? Now, do you do the bottling in Las Vegas?
Oh, everything happens in Las Vegas. So I have a barrel inventory, and I plan everything. depending on warehouse location, I figure out when I'm gonna pull it, like all the palletized stuff and the 6th floor is gone before it turns 5 years old. I burn through all that stuff. And then I have stuff on the 2nd floor and 3rd floor that, I'll probably won't start pulling that till it's 7 or 8 years old. And so we do a truck a week now, about 90 barrels a week. And we just try to rotate where we let barrels sit. And then so when the new barrels come, like we dump the older ones and store the newer ones. But yeah, like all the blending and everything that makes it special happens in Las Vegas. We do all the bottling ourselves. And
And that's one of the, so when you think about it, your price points, that's an expense that some people don't have to have. You have to get, you're distilling and aging in one place, and then you've got to get those barrels to the and then age a little bit in another place, and it's not close.
1,000 miles, 1,200 miles, isn't it?
yeah, it's not too bad. It's like but the thing is, it's like, because we contract still so much, it all balances out, because there's no way I could distill myself for the price that they contract to distill for me based on water alone. I mean, MGP sits on aquifer. They pull water out of the ground. I figured it out. We do 1,200 barrels a month contract distilling. That's over 3,500,000 gallons of water a year for mash.
Yeah,
If I'm paying the city of Las Vegas for that water,
yeah, yeah.
first of all, Lake Mead would be dropping. And
Yeah,
they
exactly.
come after us with pitchforks and
If you were
torches.
using that water in the desert, they'd have to have days that you can't water anything,
Yep.
no water days.
Yeah. Yeah, so so it's like, I think, I mean, obviously, I can't do something like Benchmark Foolproof for $25. I don't even know how they do that, because
Well,
They're
even
taxed
top
so low.
shelf is $16.99, and it's I hate to say it, I'll just say it right now. It's fucking fantastic bourbon for that. You just go, what is going on? How
Right.
do they do it? Well, and
Well-
then you don't want to buy it because it's so cheap. You got it, and I'm not drinking that cheap bourbon, even though it tastes really good. And usually it's just sitting over there on my barrel, and I'm just like hitting it, and I'm like, I can't tell anybody I like this.
Well, I mean, when you look at something that's like foolproof, like 125 proof, I mean, the tax per bottle is like $3.20 to the federal government. And so if you do your basic minimum margins, where okay, you're spending $3.20 to the federal government, so you're gonna mark that up $3.20. So now that's $7 of your FOB to a distributor. And by that time it gets to the retail, that's like $14 or $16. So $16 of that price is like tax alone, so it's like, what?
And you had to make it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think the one thing that you do well, Aaron, is your price points are awesome.
Thank you.
To be from $29 for the entry level, I think uncut unfiltered in Ohio is $69.99, or it might be $64.95. But
I had
I think $69.99.
in Kentucky, I paid $79.99 for that bottle.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's cheaper in Ohio actually, which is odd, but it is.
It's not supposed to be, because we gave the state pricing so that it would be the shelf price in Kentucky, so nobody on the other side of the river would get mad. So it should be in the 70s. Maybe somebody was like selling it for cheaper. But yeah, like, look, when everything was hot, everyone was like, you should raise your prices, you should charge $100 for this. I was like, yeah, but all this is gonna end.
Mhm.
Yeah, and also, they say what you should do, and what you want to do is bring good bourbon to people, and you're
Yes.
not, and you need to make money. I mean, you
Yeah.
ship it and whatever, but you don't need to gouge people like some of the places that that there's a gouge in there. And
Right.
when you do that, I just think that affects the long-term aspect of your brand.
Well,
You're
that was
trying-
the goal. Yeah, the goal was straight and uncut the younger was always to make up for the low margins with volume. Cause it's 4 year. I mean, right now there's 3 year in it. That'll probably end in 2 more months or so. And I only did that because I was looking at the market. I was like, man, if we wait till October to really blow this up, it's gonna be too late. Because people were charging like $100 for uncut the younger. I was like, what is happening? This is ridiculous. And so I
But
was like,
that's your marketing. That's your marketing play. I mean, it's like uncut the younger. It's like I looked at it. I remember looking at that bottle, and and just quite frankly, so how I've expanded out, I haven't. I drink. So many people are sending stuff, so I'm starting to be able to expand out because I'm getting stuff from Texas, I'm getting stuff from Michigan, I'm getting stuff from Tennessee, and that's not places I can go get it, or it's that distance is getting to the point where it's got to be a vacation for me to go out there. Now Vegas is a little different because every single state has just direct cheap flights to Vegas, so you
Right.
can get there quick. But overall, I honestly, when I started seeing Smoke Wagon on the shelf, I mean, I had the bottle in my hand 20 times because it's such an intriguing bottle, but I hadn't gotten a chance to taste it, so I hadn't gotten that bottle. Now this past November, when I bought the Christmas bottle, it was there, and the price point was perfect, and so I'm like,
Right.
I got to try this. But then I got yelled at by Super Nash. He was supposed to be on tonight, but he had car problems coming home tonight, or van problems. But anyways, he's just like, that's not what you're supposed to be buying. And I'm like, what am I supposed to? He's like, uncut, unfiltered. He goes, what are you thinking? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I thinking? I just want to try the entry level first, and it's just like, but then you get that marketing of the younger, how you put that. I just think it intrigued people because they like, you hear so many people like Smoke Wagon, they get so excited about it.
There's people, talking about age and everything. Everybody says they want 100-year-old bourbon, but there's vast swaths of people that like uncut the younger better than regular uncut unfiltered because it has no oak and it has no tannins, so it drinks softer.
It does.
Yeah, and then
I mean, a lot of that's the blending. To get a fucking 3 and 4 year to taste like that is no small feat.
No,
and
it's your palate.
The uncut that I have here is actually a higher proof than the uncut unfiltered.
Yeah,
The younger is actually a higher proof.
so there's 2 things. One, in Indiana, because it's so humid, the proof will go down over time. The other thing is uncut unfiltered. The 7 year that I put in it, that came out of the sub basement. We've had it in Las Vegas for almost a year now, and it's finally up to like 108, 109. But when I got it, it was like 102 proof. Coming out of that sub basement.
Well, I've been taught now that once it's in the barrel, there's points where I've tasted some people's distillate at 36 months, and you're like, well, that's a younger version bourbon. I mean, 2 is when you get to be straight, but and you taste it at 36 months, and it tastes like a 6-7-year-old bourbon with a ton of sugar. And it's kind of like it really, every barrel, like now when you have 22, you can't, it's hard to taste through every barrel, but as you find those barrels, I mean, there's just sometimes it's ready to go earlier because what the weather was,
Right.
I'm under a belief that probably the last 6-7 years, the summers in this country everywhere have been hotter, and the winters are still, just not. I think they were just average.
Not here, man. We've had cold winters, and our summers are like nothing now. It's July, and then it's over, and that's it. It's insane.
So that probably helps because you're not sucking as much stuff. It doesn't get as hot.
But those 39-month-old barrels, they saved me in the winter because the 4 years were so difficult and so over oaked already. And
You
then the
needed to-
39-month ones were like so beautiful. And yeah, and to tell you how much the market changed, I released that. I remember telling my business partner, I was like, I'm gonna put 39-month stuff in Uncut the Young. He's like, oh, well, should we change it every month and like do a countdown to 4 year again? And I said, no. And he was like, well, what are the haters gonna say? And I was like, it doesn't matter. It feels, I said, I can tell you how I feel if I think about waiting till October to really push this, when all these barrels start turning 4 years old. And it fills me with anxiety. I feel like we're gonna miss a window. And I can tell you how it makes me feel putting 39-month in. It's gonna be great. And he was like, okay, do it. I did 2 posts. One was my video saying, hey, Uncut the Younger is not doing what it's supposed to do. It's too limited. It's too expensive. And I'm going to put 39-month in it. And I'm going to do it so we can crank the shit out of it and get it out there and do programming and try to get it under $40. And I guarantee you it's going to taste good, because there's no point in doing all this and pushing it and exposing it to people if it tastes like young dog shit, right? And everybody's like, thank you. You're amazing. This is why we love this brand. Thank you for looking out for us. Thank you. And then I did a post about the first rare and limited in over a year and a half winter oak. 2 years ago, people have been like, I'm going to trade my kid for that. I'm going to find it. And like, everyone's like, who gives a shit? Oh, I'm never going to get one. And retailers are going to, it's going to go straight. Everything was negative. And if you reverse that, like 2 years ago, putting 39 months in some, everybody's like, this brand's dead. It's over. It's done. And and it's like, nobody gives a shit as long as it tastes good, as long as you make sure it tastes good, and using young stuff, as long as it brings you to an affordable price point, it's okay. If I was like, here's my 39-month-old product for $85, then all of a sudden,
They'd be scrutinizing you.
yeah, then it's like, what are you doing here? Oh, sorry, I wasn't planning for the future, and we're still buying aged juice, and all that's out there is 39-month-old stuff, and I'm paying $4 a barrel for it, So here it is for $85, but because it's all stuff that I either bought young or contract distilled, it's like, yeah, we're doing this, but it's to get more out, make it always available, and specifically bring the price down,
I think what you saw was the death of the bourbon snob. That's just what happened in the last couple of years. I mean, it used to be that person used to be out there, and now people get so excited over all the different stuff. But like I've noticed, and you mentioned that $129 bottle, the state of Ohio did a pick with the same art label and everything, and it was $149.99. And for me to have a barrel pick, and I love the brand. Okay. I love the actual brand. It's a favorite of mine, but that's $79.99. And then you do a barrel pick with the special label and all this, and then it's $129.99. That was kind of my cutoff. And now that it's $149.99, it's still, they've released barrels and it's all gone before you get there at noon, to the store. And then they've released barrels. That's it. And it was, as of yesterday, still on the shelf, just sitting there, because I think they went over the price threshold. It's going to be there a while, sitting there for $140.
There's a lot of stuff that's sitting now. It's pretty crazy.
And we're at a point, I think, where people, I think you said earlier, Aaron, is that people are not going to continue, I think, buying those really, really expensive everyday bottles. They are looking for the $50 to $80 range is kind of probably the hot spot. But once you eclipse $100, that market's different, unless it's a collector piece or it's a flipper thing or, whatever. But for an everyday thing to grab off the shelf that's $129 that you can get readily, I don't think that's happening a whole lot.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting too, because like I'm in some bourbon Facebook groups, and it seems like all the real bourbon people have left. Like I never see anything interesting anymore. It's definitely people that are 100% uninformed consumers trying to put on airs of being like a bourbon enthusiast. And you don't see like any mixtures, you don't see any of the Willet stuff, you don't see any rare Four Roses, you don't see any rare like bean products, you don't see anything that's like interesting. All you see is like what you know you would expect from like someone that didn't know anything about bourbon, and it's all like stuff that isn't really that good, but because there's cachet behind it. I'm like, what happened to all the real bourbon drinkers? It's like they've all left these groups or something.
Well, they have left a majority of the groups. They've gone. I've actually I belong to bourbon groups because we're shared to like 70 of them right now, and I try and belong to the groups where the admins they got the perspective, and then they let us post in there because we try and bring good content. Not only do I all day long post our content, but I find content from distillers and releases and whatever, and I'll share it. And when they appreciate that, I mean, this one group was telling me I was spam. I was just posting once every time I did a podcast. I just put a link to and they were like, "You're spam." And I'm just like, how am I spam? As if I'm spam, then every single guy that's in his car with his steering wheel showing you, I mean, is this group just about looking at pictures of what people picked up or what they drank last night? And I understand that's part of it. But when every single post is that, there should be some educational value to being in a group with some cool posts, some writer, some articles, and there's a lot out there on the internet on everything like that.
The post that did it for me, I think, for this one group was someone wrote, "What's your favorite age range for bourbon?" Mine is like 12 to 18 year, and I was like, oh my. And everybody was like, "Oh yeah, I like 25." It's like, shut the fuck up. First of all, to get there, you have to age it in a sub basement where it never gets warmer than 50 degrees. So it's all totally, yeah, exactly. It's all totally artificial. All master distillers say 5 to 7 years is the sweet spot. Obviously, there's exceptions depending on floors. But 7, 8 a year ago, people would be like, "Dude, age is relative. Drink what you like. It's all going to vary on the conditions." But everybody was like, "Oh, it was all like just people who didn't know anything." And it's like all the guys that know stuff be gone or something.
I agree with that because there's a couple, like when they put the 10 years out or the 12 years out, I always find that like if you're like for instance, one brand Rebel Yell,
Right.
I always find that the 100 proof Rebel and the Rebel the actual Rebel Yell that's just right on the shelf, that's a harsh, spicy, go to the concert and get drunk off your ass whiskey for shooting, right?
Right.
So then they release some of these cast strength Rebels and the stiller cuts, and they still have that flavor profile. Okay. And that's sitting there at 6-7 years. And then they released the 10-year Rebel. And it wasn't even the same freaking bourbon. It was now mellow and smooth, and I don't, or silky. There was the spice of that brand was completely gone. There was no pepper, and it was just like, and I enjoyed it, but it's like, like you said, there's that brand where it is the brand, and then when you start to take it further, you're starting to get into something different,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like Desert Jewel. People are always like, "When are you going to do Desert Jewel again?" I'm like, I don't even know how that fits in the profile, really, because I had 35 barrels on the 4th floor that were 10 years old, and they were totally over oaked. And I was like, 35 barrels back then. I was like, what am I gonna do with this? So I couldn't even sell 35 private barrels at that time. So I was like, I gotta get it out. And I even proofed it down to cut down on the oak. And all these people are like, that's the best thing you've ever done. I'm like, well, let
Have
me
you-
tell you, when I used to taste it at liquor stores, it was not the best. Like 1 out of 12 people liked it, and everyone else thought it was too oaky and too harsh.
But that's the great thing about bourbon is that the proof hounds. Everybody,
Right.
there's these guys where like if they won't even touch something that's 80 proof because somehow they're so much better than you that they drink 125, 115.
Well,
That
I can
you're just
understand that 80 proof, because if it's 80 proof, it's chill filtered, so it's gonna be thin. It's not gonna
Right.
have a fat, it's not gonna be as textured but
I agree with that. Okay. But when you get I just last night did a podcast with one of the neighbor women, and she drinks, but she doesn't drink bourbon because 30 years ago she had a bad experience with whiskey. So I had her on the podcast. Okay. And I showed her how to like bourbon, and I gave her Basil Hayden, and it was 80 proof. And she was like, her eyes were lighting up and popping out of her head. But
Right.
I got to a Booker's at 125.6, and she's like, oh, that's really good. And it's just like that flavor, but it really comes down to your taste buds. Because
Yes.
I find if you've drank a lot of whiskey, you can't taste what's in an 80 proof because it is thin. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so there's a lot of people who are just coming into it and they can taste it because they haven't, for whatever reason, their taste buds aren't gone. They haven't burned them off or whatever. And it's just those guys just need. I've met a guy that has to have like a certain kind of whiskey because he can't taste the whiskey otherwise.
Right, well,
And it's just-
a lot of those proof hounds, you go to their Instagrams and they're drinking it on ice.
That's the chilled filtered.
They're like, I only want hazmat, and then you go to their Instagram and they're like, I love this hazmat, and it's on ice. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Not hazmat anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to sit there and say I don't enjoy pouring it on ice every once in a while. I find it when I pour it on ice, I'm not looking for that flavor. I'm looking kind of for a refreshing, cool drink.
Oh yeah.
And as the ice melts, it gets waterier and waterier, and
Hey,
it goes down easier and easier.
I blended small batch specifically to be versatile, and the way it opens up on ice, it never gets watered down. It tastes like fruit punch. And so for me, uncut unfiltered, I blended that to taste its best neat. And I do not like it on ice because it does get like kind of one dimensional. And but yeah, it's like you drink it however you want. Like I don't give a it's like I always say,
I mean, I know a bunch of one-dimensional, delicious, $22 bottles of, but that's when I'm at my fantasy baseball or football draft. I don't mind putting that. I like the taste. It's one-dimensionally good. And then you're not when you're doing a draft or something,
well,
you're not
that's
looking.
that's what you're about to drink right now. I mean, it's not super complex,
Right.
but it's good. And hey, if you're out, it might be nice to drink something 92.5 proof and not 117, 118 proof, so you can have more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And drive home.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and that's what I always try and tell people, some like for me, I can't really settle on something that I really like because all the bottles, when you're here, most of them are open because I've had to taste them and tell people what we thought. But then to revisit it, it's almost impossible because I've done a Monday night podcast. I'm doing a Tuesday night podcast. I'm doing a Thursday night podcast. And then when I go up, then we're going to be with friends on a Saturday. Well, if I'm drinking full out and I'm trying to empty these bottles, I'm dead eventually.
Yeah.
So
Well, when I'm at home drinking, I want to cut unfiltered because I want to savor it and pick out flavors and everything. But if I'm out doing events, I'll drink straight or small batch because I'm talking and I'm being social and I don't want to sit there and I just want to drink something yummy, like you said, right? And I don't have to think about it or pick out flavors. So,
or control yourself as much, because you can be drinking that and then you can have a couple with everybody, opposed to when you're doing uncut.
yeah,
All of a sudden, and it's funny because it doesn't matter who we are, we've all been bit. Where it's like, how the hell did you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh God, that should not have happened. So
So
and
Aaron, what's the, so not to get off that, but the future for the brand? What's your vision going for the next couple of years? What are you targeting? What are you looking at doing?
well, trying to get in every state now that we have the ability to bottle more and our inventory is coming of age. Especially, by the end of the year, beginning of 2024, we'll be in our new facility finally that we bought that lands. Fuck, I don't even know, maybe 2021. And that's gonna be awesome. It's 4.5 acres, a block from the stratosphere. And so we'll be able to do tours there. I mean, it's an incredible piece of property. It's,
Bungee jumping?
what's that?
Bungee jumping off the stratosphere?
Strippers with full auto machine guns and wild burro rides, petting zoo for the kids,
So you have the whole experience.
Yeah, and that will give the brand more exposure, because you can only go so far with Instagram and everything. If we really want to do, and so people are always like, "Hey, how much you want to do?" And I was like, it's like not really fun anymore. Then we'll scale back a little, because the whole reason I got out of the bar business and got into this was, well, the bar business, the lifestyle has an expiration date due to age for me. I didn't want to do it anymore. And also I'm not relevant. I don't know what kids want. I'm not wanting, I don't understand what they want. Like people tell me, hey, we're gonna do this at the bar. I'm like, that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. And it's totally successful, so and I don't really have that lifestyle anymore. I have a bourbon lifestyle. I just like to sit alone and drink and smoke a cigar. And then also it's when I stopped partying and everything, I just sort of realized that the bar business, there was no creativity. I was just managing shit. And with this, I'm always being challenged. And I can be like, hey, I want to design a t-shirt, or I want to design a new expression, or do a new label, or even the blending. I'm always learning something blending. And so it's just, I'm always being intellectually challenged, and I like working. If I'd die if I retired, I'd enjoy it for about 4 days.
But technically it is work, but you enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
That's like that's why the podcast, we are setting this podcast up so that in a couple of years, when I retire from my day job, this is what I'm going to do. I mean,
Yeah.
I've already been really antsy and wishing, because if I was doing it full time, I could do so much more,
Right.
And at this point, I can only do what there's a bunch of times where I have a bunch of ideas and, it's getting to be 11 o'clock at night. And when I was younger, I'd be gone till 1 a.m. and finish it all up. And now it's 11 o'clock at night. And before you know it, it's 11:12 and I'm sound asleep because
Yeah.
we're not getting younger, but it's so much fun, right? That's what it comes down to. And when you're joining, so you are almost technically retired. Because you're doing what you love.
There's a lot going on all the time.
Right. But you said if you stopped, you die, right?
Yeah, if I stopped, I'd die. There are moments where I lose the balance and I'm working too much, but those are getting more and more temporary. And especially the more successful we are, and then once we move and I have places to actually put people, I can hire people to do the things I don't want to do and just blend and do the fun stuff and plan big picture things. And yeah, because and I love it. And we've turned down big offers. Like, people are like, oh, are you next? And like, They came to us first, man. Like, you know, I don't. What would I do? I mean, and it's like the money is insane. Like, you know, because we're still not really we're doing okay, but Jonathan and I, my business partner and I, we're not making like big money yet. That'll happen, you know, within 6 to 8 months. But you know, if you sold, all of a sudden you have more money than you can spend in a lifetime. And people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you won't take the money, you're stupid or whatever. And it's like, well, you know, one day that money will be nothing because I have confidence in the brand. And the
Right.
other thing is, it would just make everything disingenuous, in my opinion. Like, we got here with the support of the fans, and I just feel like everything would have been bullshit, and I wouldn't feel good about it. Like, hey, thanks everyone, see ya, you know, because there's no way we could do it the way we do it.
If you
We would
sold.
lose the soul of the brand, you know, because and then also, it's not like I could sell and walk away. They would want to keep me, you
Uh-huh.
know, and then it's
Well, I mean,
handcuffs time.
Penelope, straight up, Penelope, they did it, they whatever, they were doing it, and then they're still there. They didn't just kick them out, right?
They're not still there. They're there for like another year and then they're gone.
And then they're
They
gonna
just
be
have to
gone.
get the numbers up, and that's it. And once they get the numbers up, they don't even have to be there for a year. If they get the numbers to a certain point, they're gone.
They're gone. Okay.
Yeah,
Do they want to be gone?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I
Well,
can
I met
appreciate.
them. So you've actually talked to them?
Yeah, when I was in Illinois.
Okay, cool.
But
That's
no, I can
excellent.
appreciate that, Aaron, that you're invested in it like you are, because I mean, again, if it was about the money, number one, you'd be selling the bottles for more than you're selling them for. You know, let's be honest. It's not just about the money. It's about a love of something that at the end of the day, you're fulfilled. You feel like you're doing something that means something. That you have something that has your name attached to it. Your face attached to it.
It's funny, you just said feel fulfilled, and I always, that's the first time that like anyone's put a word to it. It's such an obvious word, because I always talk about, if I sold, what would I have? I'd just have money.
You have money.
I wouldn't have anything. And I always are like, oh, I don't know if it's ego or what to be the smoke wagon guy, but it's a fulfilling experience, you know.
Well, just the fact that you do Instagram, you did Instagram, it
Mhm.
tells me you have an ego that's being no, but not an overinflated ego. You basically thrive on doing something and being successful now. And what's awesome is you're not selling, and I really appreciate that aspect. And not that I would have any, if you did, there's so many people that did it, and then the brand goes and then there's a lot of money. But if you guys take it to that next level, not only will you have your ego still intact, you'll have all the stuff and all the jobs, but you'll also have the money. And
Yeah.
it's like you have it all that way,
Yeah.
but you got to be patient. And
Yeah.
If you sell, you have one thing. If you sell, you have one thing. You have money.
Money, yeah.
And that's it. And if you keep it, you have your employees, you have your friendships throughout the
Yeah,
industry.
and they have a great life, you know, because we have, I might not be making tons of money yet, but the company has tons of money, and I make sure they're taken care of. They all get paid a lot. They all have like the best benefits you can get. They all have, what do you call, they all have pensions, they all have life insurance, they all have everything. And I'm pretty fun, pretty fun, fun to work for. And we've got a good team, and it's cool. Like, you feel like you're making a difference. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And,
well, this is the first time we've met or even talked. I mean, I don't think we've even talked on Facebook, but CT set this up, and I really appreciate it. But I can tell you one thing: it's kind of like what was meeting you, and then your personality and everything, and then how you're doing something, you've got everything. And then now when I go in to purchase a bottle or see a bottle, I'm going to be wanting to purchase it because and that's how that works. And I think there's a lot of people that just, watched here on Facebook, and then also as we put it up on YouTube and out there, you get the word out. And when you understand somebody who's put what you're putting behind it, and there's places, big places, that have families, and you see them putting the same thing behind it. They do a lot of stuff. Although the big conglomerate might be running everything at one level, they're still running what the quality is, and you have that same kind of thing, going where, and it's kind of exciting to see how passionate you are and when you tell your story.
Oh, thank you, man. And like, look, it's like I did a post on my Instagram. I did this huge event in Illinois at Binny's. I was the only brand owner behind the table. And it was a 2-part event. The first is all the Binny's employees from all 30 whatever stores they have. And then it was all their whiskey people. And so all these other owners were there, and they had like brand ambassadors behind the table. I'm like, well, that's what big brand, because these guys, they were like, well, I want to be like a big brand. Well, then what's separating you from a big brand? If you're not having a real connection with your fan base, then why would they choose you over a big brand? Especially, I mean, let me tell you, big brands have been cranking out the juice. I might be ahead of the game with Uncut the Younger or whatever, but they'll all get there. And then all of a sudden that will be the market. And I, hopefully I will be still perceived as an individual who, it's my palate. I'm there, who's doing it, who's blending it. And that's what'll separate me. But then you'll have all these other brands, and they're not going to have any cask strength bourbon in that price point. And it's just like, well, because the big brands, they have advantages and disadvantages. Their disadvantages, it takes them forever to act. They're so slow. The advantages, they got money, man. And money it's not just, oh, well, we can lay down all this juice and we can reach these price points. They can buy all the data. They can buy all the data from distributors. They can buy all the data, all the Nielsen data from stores. They are totally in tune with what the market is at all times.
Well,
there
I mean,
no
but
surprises.
They can even take your bourbon that you're like, just let's say uncut, and they get a bottle, they can analyze it from a chemistry level. And if they want to produce something that's similar, they can do it if they want. That's how, that's how detailed
I
it
don't
gets.
know if that's real, because, when I do uncut, we'll do 4 batches, all the same blend that have the letters. And every time
it's a little bit different. Right. Now, once again, see, you exist in what the industry has evolved into, because up until the 90s, consistency in a brand was the hardest thing to do. I mean, to make that year after year taste exactly the same was a very difficult thing to do. You had to be skilled with a great palate and an understanding of what you did. And then
that's what I try to do with Straight and Uncut the Younger, to differentiate them. They're your pal, they're your familiar friend that
right.
You always know what to expect when you get it.
So then when you start making those blends, you're trying to get you're trying to stay consistent. But with the uncut, there's so many people that have jumped in, especially the younger people, who love the diversity of that. Yeah. And I love the fact that when I'm tasting through some of these newer, because of the aging process right now, how the climate is in their certain areas, I find that the bourbon from year to year has been getting better, even on the low end of the brands.
Yes.
Because of the fact that those barrels are aging the way that you haven't had any weird weather phenomena for whiskey. You know what I mean? You've had like the
also
extreme
think-
end of the best of it, and it just keeps staying there, getting a little bit hotter. You know what I mean?
Well, I also think that, blenders are finally getting prestige and people
Yes.
want them. Because
Yeah.
what they don't understand about master distillers is those guys are chemists, and people are like, why don't you distill, besides the fact the water and everything is like, if I was gonna distill myself, I would hire somebody. That is not my forte. I am
Right.
not a guy who wants to sit there and create a chemical reaction every day that's identical to the chemical reaction before. It is very hard, and you have to have the personality for it. I do not have the personality for that. I have the personality for, woo, give me all the stuff, man. Let me mix it together and see what happens. You know
Well,
what
I mean, that's why there's like, Old Forester. They hire young women to be the blenders. I mean,
Right.
their palate's phenomenal. So they can produce some really good. They get all the shit, and you could, it's when it's distilled properly, then
Right.
it comes down to what you release it to, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
look what they did for Freddie No at Jim Beam. I mean, they built it, named it after his dad, but that's his distillery as far as what he can do, because he was trying to do it on the big stills, and he would just, the maintenance people would just like go crazy because they have it all set up to produce Jim Beam or Booker's, or and it's just what they produce every day, and he's trying to produce bourbons with an extra grain of, you throw rice into the whole picture, it doesn't distill the same way, and
Right.
that's why they built that distillery. So it's exciting times, right?
Yeah, well, that was the thing too, like when I went to MGP for the first time, and they were like, oh, you want to meet Greg, the master distiller? I'm like, yeah, where is he? Is he like rubbing grains together, is he in his overall sniffing the distillate? They're like, no, he's in the control room looking at the computer screens. What are you talking about? And you go to the control room, and there's all these computer screens, and the computer screens have the chemical in real time, the chemical composition of the distillate, because they have a methanol sniffer. And then you go, so they're making sure the chemical composition of the distillate is exactly the same every time. And then you start thinking, well, hey, if there's acetone in it or methanol, people are gonna go blind and die. So it's kind of, I would want a methanol sniffer telling me when to do my heart cuts, and not my temperature or like smelling it and tasting it, because and that's what you want. You want that distillate to be exactly the same, so that when it goes into the barrel, you can have some sort of idea. That's where the magic happens. And so I think, and if those master distillers didn't have the skill set they have, there's just too many variables. It'd be too unpredictable,
That's like modern day distilling, okay? But you still need somebody who understands what what they're trying to do. So you can't just you hire the distiller and tell them this is what you need to do. You just match these little numbers and they're on the screen. It's like you need somebody who is looking to take those numbers specifically they've distilled before, and then make their process that they've come up with perfect. And that's just kind of I've just seen some really good.
You need someone at the tail end of it, taking the finished product and knowing what to do with it, because everything's going to change depending on the weather.
Oh
Again,
yeah.
nobody has an oak farm. You don't know where that oak was grown or what kind of flavors it's going to impart, and sort of do warehouse management, deciding when to pull what, depending on its location and all that stuff,
Well, the cool thing is one of our friends we know Greg Schneider, and he's bringing back the Chicken Cock brand. But one of the things he did was, because he was head of the cooperage at Brown and Foreman, he got a West Virginia company to make the Great Barrel Company. But he basically kind of told them how to set it up. In exchange for, he basically picks every stave for his barrels from wood, oak that grew on the shade side of the mountain that they pulled out. And then he picks every single one and he keeps the consistency of the tree that
How many
picked it.
barrels does he do annually?
He's doing 600. He does 600 bourbon barrels and 600 rye barrels. Now this year they went to, I think they went 900, 300 on the
Yeah, well,
bourbon.
I do 1,200 a month. I don't think we could pick the shade.
Oh no, he knew he knew that eventually would end, but he basically did the seed, and it's like he initially started distilling at Bardstown Bourbon Company, and
Right.
basically it was him, Nick Smith, and Steve Nally, all three of them. So you had like three master distillers working on getting the perfection of this,
Right.
and he was just buying regular barrels. But for the last 4 years, he's been doing this with the barrels, and I'm just they just switched over to the barrels that they were purchasing from what they were doing before that, where they were blending a little bit of some of their younger stuff with stuff that they had purchased from, for sourcing.
Right.
But now this year was the first chicken cock that was 100% their 4-year out of the barrels that they just purchased normally. But like you said, when the stave companies are making the barrels, they're not like trying to keep the tree separate. You could have all the staves come from all different trees.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
that's the case, there's never a time where it's all the same. And that explains always the difference of the taste of the whiskey, right?
Aaron, since you're sourcing through them, do you have a choice on where the barrels come from, or do you have to use what they set up for you?
I have to use what they say. I mean, if I wanted to pick, I could do like, maybe some special runs where we would hand pick the barrels, but the cost, I'm sure, would be exponentially higher.
Yeah.
So by sourcing, not only sourcing the liquor, the bourbon from them, but you're also sourcing the barrels through them as well.
Yeah, so they primarily now, it seems like they primarily use Speyside and Independent Stave. I really don't see Kelvin too much more anymore. I'd have to go back and look at my inventory. I know their palletized stuff. It's all Speyside or all Independent. I can't remember which one they liked better. And
Okay.
then I'm the only supplier that gets to specify side fill racked. So all my contract distilling is side fill racked, and doing 1,200 barrels a month, that is the maximum side fill rack they can do of a single mash bill. So all the 36% rye that is racked in the old Seagram's warehouses is mine.
So what's your distillate? What's your mash bill on your bourbon?
Oh, it's the 36% rye, 4% barley, 60% corn. That used to be the heart of Seagram's. That's where that comes from.
Okay. And then what's your barrel char?
4.
Because what I pick up that Smoke Wagon has is that I can taste the char that's in there,
I love it.
and
Yeah.
definitely now with
I like to blend out the tannins, but leave the char. So it's got like that char on the back of your tongue. There's like a little bit of bitter black tea, but it never gets to that point where it's like really tannin heavy.
I would say that's exactly what you've just explained exactly what I'm tasting, because I pick up the char and it almost reminds me that it drinks like a scotch, a little bit like a scotch. It's got that, now I could tell you this particular bottle,
Right.
I'm picking up the char with a little bit of a fruity note.
Yeah.
There's a little, but this bottle, I pick up the char with a chocolate caramel note.
So that the Christmas straight, that should taste the same all the time. The uncut, what batch is it?
It's the 168D.
Is 168. So is that summer?
It was bottled January 26, 2023.
Oh, okay, wintertime batch. Yeah, so it's gonna be heavier and earthier and have deeper flavors.
Now,
Okay.
mine's back 66.
66?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And that tells you right there how long he's been drinking your product.
There you go.
It's funny. I was just talking to someone, and this guy, he said his bourbon group was like, oh, Smoke Wagon has done, it's gone so downhill in quality. He's like, okay, well, Aaron says the best batches are from like beginning of like summer 2022 and this year because I fucked with him way too much when there was hype behind the brand. I was so stressed out. Every time I was doing an uncut blend, I would keep blending past where it was ready just to make sure it was the best it could be. And finally I said, fuck it, I really like this. We're going with this. And I said, consistently, they're the best now. And he said that all the new batches in a blind taste, the newer batches were chosen over the older batches, and even Uncut the Younger, he just threw it in, not telling anybody, and people preferred Uncut the Younger over the old batches. So, it's like, I'm like, well, shit, I should sure fucking hope so. I mean, I've been doing it for 7, 8 years now. I hope I've gotten better. And our inventory is so vast, people like talk about old uncut batches, like we're using like 50 and 40-year-old bourbon. It was still 4 and 8 year, and now it's 4 year and 6 year, sometimes 5 years, 7 year, and 8 years. So it's not like it went from being like this and oh my God, they no longer use that 20-year-old bourbon. They're using 4 year. It's like, yeah, it was always 4 year. And the craziest thing is when I learned that people don't know what age tastes like, is during the hypiest hype of the brand, I did uncut batches with no 4 year and sometimes no 5 year. And everybody was like, these uncut batches are so young and so harsh. Oh my God. And I was like, actually, it's all old juice. And the reason, and you don't know what oak tastes, these people don't know what oak tastes like because most old stuff is charcoal filtered or chill filtered. And so it removes a lot of the tannins, and all you're left with is like what you were saying, an hour ago, it's a very smooth, and
Yeah.
they don't understand what oak tastes like or what age tastes like because they're not drinking unadulterated stuff. And so it's just,
I
and
mean,
by the way, and that was helped me with the evolution of Uncut the Younger, because when I first did Uncut the Younger, I too was like, oh my God, I'm going Uncut the Younger. And I tried to leave some age in it. And everybody's like, it's too young, it's too harsh. And I was like, oh, well, let's see what happens when I blend all the age out and just 100% fruity time, no oak at all. And like, let's really make it a cast strength version of straight, maybe some char, but no oak, no bitter black tea, no tannins. And now everybody loves it, and it's a trip.
so
'Cause-
Yeah.
so also, you just look at what's behind you. I mean, that's crazy. You've got, and so you kind of understand the market in the fact that you're never going to make everybody happy, like you said,
No.
but at the same time, there's so much of a vast difference of palettes of what people want in these whiskey pockets, right?
Yeah.
So what opened me up to it is I went on a bunch of picks with the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. We've done a couple picks ourselves. I went on a couple group picks. And when you're on a group pick or you're picking that one barrel, you're looking for a special barrel, something unique,
Yes.
maybe not even on brand, but you're looking for, big, bold flavor or just something that's
Something
really
weird.
complex.
Something weird and funky, that's what I think single barrel should be.
Yeah, but then you go on a pick with the state of Ohio. And actually, I did it with Greg Metz for Old Elk. He took that whole, I mean, basically, they don't say it, but he basically produced a high malt bourbon. I mean, it's the malt's 34%. It's the rye that's down, and then with the corn. And
Right.
When we were picking, we had 40 barrels to taste through. There was finished barrels, there was wheat whiskey, there was rye, there was, and we went through 40. And when you're picking for the whole state of Ohio, you're not picking for that one barrel. They basically picked 36 of the 40 barrels. And there were just a couple of them that you could tell were off. But then when I talked to Jim Canepa, who's the head of OHLQ, I asked him, and he's like, there are so many different pallets in the state of Ohio. We just have to make sure when we're picking barrels, if someone offers it to us, that we know they're gonna buy it, but we have to make sure that it's
Hey, by the
good.
way, that's why I go through every barrel and approve what is going to be offered as a pick and what's not. Because I know there's gonna be somebody out there with a shit palate and they're gonna like some off barrel for some stupid fucking reason. And that 99% of the people aren't gonna like it, and it has my name on it, and they're gonna try it and go, well, this is terrible, And so I will not let that happen. No way.
So
I mean,
now
it's
you want me to
terrible,
come
but-
out to Vegas and do a pick with you.
Yeah, well, you gotta be fast. There's
Yeah, because it'll
there's no
evaporate by the time
notes.
you get there.
Yeah, don't bring a notebook and start writing out. It's like yes or no. Moving on.
Yeah, that barrel you wanted is half gone in an hour. Yeah.
Oh my God, man. When I used to sneak bourbon groups in back in the day, they'd show up with their notebooks and everything. And I'm like, guys, you're on vacation. I'm not on vacation. Like, just please, like, tell me which one you like better. Like, let's keep it moving. And they're all like, do you taste the cherry? Oh, I think I taste the cherry. I mean, it's like, dude, you either like it or you don't. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
And that's like, I've been doing these videos and people are like, oh, I'd love to do that with you. I'm like, we just did 24 barrels in 35 minutes. Okay. It's like, you would slow us down. We got to get this shit done. And because it's either good or it's bad. If it's bad, it doesn't make it. If it's good, it makes it, And but yeah, and then also back to the weird part, like there was a group where I handpicked a barrel for them because it tasted like it was infused with jalapeno. And I gave them two, and they picked the one that was like really delicate and soft. And I was like, why are you guys picking that one? I only kind of gave you two just so you had a choice, but really there was no choice. It was the jalapeno barrel. And like, well, this one we could drink every day. I'm like, I got fucking all these other expressions you could drink every day. Why do you want your single barrel pick to be something you could drink every day? That should be like special time.
You want to drink that bottle and know that that's where it came from.
Yeah, there's only so many bottles of it. It's like memory in a bottle, It's like that's the one you want to bust out when you're in the mood for that. Like if you want something to drink every day.
I agree. I agree. It's like it's like when you pick for our group, okay? There's ones that will just sell. It's just like, well, that one will sell. Everybody will love that one. And then there's that one that's sitting there that was all complex and it was like the most unique kind of thing and it was changing and doing all this shit. And I'm like, that's the one I want. And everybody's like, well, but you could sell that one. And I'm like, I want people when you're doing picks to think that you're going to be getting them something different than that they can just, if they want something that just sells and it's just a version that's right on a flavor profile of the actual small batch, it's like, no.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's nothing unpleasant, like even these barrels we're picking today, four didn't make it because they didn't taste good, but there was weird ones, but everything was good, it was just like, whoa, there's a lot going on here, but nothing was unpleasant, but I know what you mean. It's like if you want something smooth, just go, drink a regular core.
Why are you on a barrel pick tasting barrel strength bourbon if you want it to be smooth? No.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be interesting.
Alan Bishop from the Spirit of French Lick, he's the distiller there. He did a video on, he goes, you should never use smooth as a description of, he goes, as a distiller, it's like, what the fuck does that mean? Tell me what smooth means.
Easy drinking, no bite. I mean, again, it's like when you give when I give inexperienced bourbon drinkers all the core expressions, they think straight is the most expensive because it's the easiest to drink. And so they associate that with like having no bite is luxury, and
yeah, well, and then I also find if you have women, they'll like make faces at 80 proof, and they'll be like, oh, like that's so hot. And then you give them 125 proof, and they're like, oh, I like that. It's just like it makes nothing ever makes sense, and that's what I love about whiskey. It's just you could be, you're doing for a consistent kind of thing, and really putting a lot of time and effort, and it's showing in your products. So
No, thank you. Yeah, it's still a lot of fun most of the time,
I'm excited to see more of it in Ohio. I think you were in Cleveland, what, a few weeks ago?
Yeah, it was a little unfortunate. The broker kind of treated my trip like a normal brand coming to town. And so we
Oh,
did way too much on-premise sales focus when I should have been doing tastings and bottle signings. And he was like, oh, we'll do that next time. I'm like, dude, I'm not a brand ambassador. I'm the owner of the company. It's like, there's only 12 months a year, and look at how many states I'm in. When do you think I can come back? Like, it's not going to be next month, it's like, so it's kind of a wasted opportunity. And the state, I told the state, I was like, hey, I felt like this was a wasted opportunity. We should have been doing this. And they're like, yes, that's exactly what you should have been doing. You should have been doing tastings at, liquor stores, agencies, moving product so that your 45-day sales goes up. So we order more. It's all an algorithm, and then everybody can get more. If it's, if these on-premise places are buying 1 or 2 bottles a week, that's not going to change the algorithm. And I was like, yeah, the fans were kind of bummed because nobody got to see me. And she was like, we were bummed. You know how long we wanted to get the state wanted to get you in here, and nobody knew you were here, and we didn't get to meet you. Like, no one was happy. But yeah, I was in Columbus and then Cleveland.
So next time you come,
yeah, let us know.
Let us know. We'll do a pre-podcast before you come, and then
Okay.
we'll meet you where you're at and promote it. Because honestly, like I said, when people meet you, so that's the most important thing. Although you're in all the states, you have to do it there, and they meet you and then they know your story, because I find there's a lot of brands that launch here in Ohio, and people walk into the store and they see it, and they're like, I know nothing about that. And then they're like,
Exactly, yeah.
well, I do know, I saw that guy,
Yeah.
and that's why Instagram's so important. That might help you out, because I saw him on Instagram. I'm going to try that bottle. And that's the key to everything, right?
Being there and connect, there's no substitute for being there and connecting with people.
Boots on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how way it's been done forever in this industry, and it's still a very important thing. But now you got social media, so when you got boots on the ground, people are like, I always wanted to meet you.
Social media is good to generate like hype and
Recognition.
and get it in the stores, but you got to go and like connect with the fan base and everything and dinners are huge, because people will go to the liquor store to meet you, specifically for me.
Right.
People will go to dinners just because they go to all the dinners that restaurant has. And so they're being introduced to the brand for the first time, and they're here and they're like, oh my God, this was the best one I've ever been to, because I'm up there going, fuck, blah, 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 and usually it's robots like, oh, we create the yeast. This is the best yeast, and all this stuff. And like, even when I was in Kentucky, everyone was like, thank you for being a real human, like doing stuff for like the Louisville Bourbon Society or whatever. It's huge. It has like tons of members. So all these brands want to get in front of them. And they just send like a brand ambassador who's like, meh, meh, meh. Like, yeah, dude, we can read all this shit on the website. You haven't told us anything new. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
just like that. We do Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and it's just such a great festival. Not just for a brand, but to go there, all the people that are in Kentucky that are associated with making it, they're there. They're
Right.
on premise, Fredno, Dan McKee from Mitchell, all the people they're all there. And it's like, it's not a normal festival. Like you said, you go to a festival, that you go to, you might be one of two people that are selling their brand that are part of making it.
Right.
And then the other people are reps and they're just pouring in it. I find they have a value because you get to taste the whiskeys that you
Yeah.
might not ever taste,
That's good for stores, like if you can't get to every single store and the product's not really moving, yeah, hire a rep to just let people try it. They don't
Right.
even have to know what the brand's about. They just, if they try and go, yum, oh, look at the price. That tastes good and that price is great. I'll buy it. I don't need to know the fucking story. But if you're going to a whiskey specific event, I mean, I'm not going to go to alcohol events anymore because there's people there that are there for beer or whatever or rum. And they're like, which one will get me fucked up the fastest? I'm like, oh my God, the time is way too valuable for this. Okay.
That's not what bourbon's supposed to be.
Yeah. But like bourbon whiskey specific events and everybody's like there for, yeah, they want to try it. That's where I want to be, if I'm not doing a smoke wagon specific event. But yeah, like the store stuff, like doing bottle signings is awesome. But for me to go to like all these stores and do tastings, it's like, that's not, anybody can do that,
Right.
Yeah.
I think
You would do well at somewhere like Bardstown where you could get your name out there in a positive way where there's 50 other brands, but people would meet you.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's the key. They meet you. I mean,
Yeah.
bottle signing and whatever. I mean,
That was like when I did that one whiskey fest at Binny's, I was like, man, we didn't send you guys like table covering or like a little, there was no smoke wagon, anything. And they're like, you don't need it. You're behind the table.
Yep. It's important. I mean, brand recognition is by you just as much as the bottle or, and a lot of brands don't have a face to go with the brand. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Or they try to fabricate it, or like I've seen pictures like, because we're successful, you see like these owners like rolling barrels around in brand new clothes and brand new clothes and stuff.
Yeah. Not.
How you look when you roll a barrel around, dude. And you will not see the pictures of me anymore because I did all
Yeah.
that shit and I'm done. Like I got
it's just done.
You're out west, so do you know Seth from Broken Barrel?
I met him once, yeah.
So Seth's a great guy, and that's the one thing I can appreciate about Seth is he's not out there in a suit and tie breaking barrels and putting stuff together. He's like you. He's working his butt off and trying to create a brand that he is the face of. So
I am not. I don't roll barrels around anymore, though. Those days are over.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's
called smart.
But the question everybody wants to know is, does the 8-track player really work?
Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sad thing is I bought an Alpine 7390 for my 88 IROC, which was expensive, and I sent it out to get it fixed, and it ate my Def Leppard Hysteria tape, which is like a super rare, metal, like what is it, CRO2 tape, like, and it sounded so good, and then it stopped.
Oh my God.
Wait a minute. So do you know that's
back
where we were
memories.
last Tuesday we were at the Def Leppard concert.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
That was
Oh, dude.
they didn't lose a step, Def Leppard. There was Motley Crue and Def Leppard. Motley Crue definitely is showing their age,
Vocal age.
but
Boys,
Def
isn't the
Leppard,
whole thing that Nikki Sixx doesn't play bass anymore. Like he stopped playing and the track kept going or something.
but when you're there, okay, and this visual that they put forward, I mean, they are like taking, like when Def Leppard was on the stage and you got the big screens, it allowed you from the distance to see them. Okay,
Right.
They put them up there and you could see who was singing, you could see who was playing guitar, but frickin' Motley Crue, it was basically they turned their whole concert into a music video. I mean, it was like they would like Vince Neil would be singing, and all of a sudden you'd see him for like 2 seconds, on the big screen, and then they'd like freeze it and throw all these special effects. He was melting with lava, and then the lights and the laser. I mean, it was like,
Oh,
there's
Def
no-
Leppard are like, I mean, those albums, especially like Hysteria, it was so well produced. I mean, it was so textured, and I mean, Motley Crue was just like,
oh yeah, there was a difference. Both I enjoyed Motley Crue. I wouldn't say I didn't like them, and I've heard that I expected worse.
yeah, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean,
But
Jesus.
Def Leppard just went. It was nuts. How good!
That's
it was. I didn't feel they
Def
lost a
Leppard's
step.
like accomplished musicians on a very high level.
Yeah, and still to this day, the guy could sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and you'd be like, "God, that's the best fucking rendition of that I've ever heard in my life."
When he started out the night, he wasn't pushing the high notes.
Right.
Okay. So, and then, but as it kept going and they just kept building towards their hits, he was just knocking the high notes out of, I mean, it sounded like, I swear to God, Rock of Ages was better than the album.
Yeah.
That listening to that song live, I was like, that's better than the album. And so when you say that about someone live, and then their advanced age for a band, it's just like, I wasn't expecting that, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Right on.
So, all right.
I mean, it's getting really late for you.
Yep, it's 11.
Well, we had Lisa Roper Wicker on one night, and it was when I finished, the podcast was like 2 hours and 43 minutes. I actually apologized to her because we were just talking and whatever, and I'm just like, how the hell was it 2 hours and 43 minutes? I cut it in half and whatever, but we enjoy hanging out with you, so I appreciate.
I enjoy it too. If it started at 4. I definitely could have gone 2 hours and 20 minutes, but man, it has been a long day.
Yeah, no, I don't want anybody to go 2 hours and 43 minutes, but at the same time, it helps. The longer you're just live on Facebook, the more people that you're getting out there too. So, and we really appreciate your time. And
my pleasure. I had a great time. I hope I answered all your questions.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay, everybody, we're going to wrap up. We are the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, www.scotchybourbonboys.com for all Scotchy Bourbon Boy things, Glencairns, t-shirts, and we've actually got a new product that's going to be, we've got
what is it?
Bottle openers that go on your refrigerator.
Is that made out of a bung?
It looks like it, but no, it was just like, I couldn't believe the product. But then it's like, it really pulls off the barrel head look, right?
Oh, okay.
And then it's it opens the bottle, but it will stick right to your refrigerator. So that's one of our new products that we're selling. And then also, remember, we're on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube, and then also on all major podcast formats. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify, and ask Alexa or Siri to play us, and you can. But remember, and thank you, Aaron, for joining us tonight.
Oh, again, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone who tuned into Facebook Live, and then also people listening on the podcast. If you're fans, I appreciate you all. You're what makes it happen.
Thanks, CT, for doing that.
Hey, awesome. Glad to be a part of it.
All right. So
thank you.
Good bourbon equals good times and good friends. And little Steve-O is going to take us out.
This is our outro. All right.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die.